What for you is a woman?
Find
It's
those
the
things.
presence, what you have inside that you can bring.
She was the girl they called ugly. The child born in shame, too poor to eat, too thin to be loved, and too scarred to ever be beautiful, or so they said. She served soldiers with a fake smile, slept in a room with 10 others, and drank water from a car radiator to stay alive. That little girl? She became Sophia Loren. But what the world saw, the elegance, the gowns, the Oscars, was never the whole story. Behind the flashing cameras was a woman who bled in silence, loved in exile, and survived everything from war to Hollywood betrayal. She was slapped by the man she loved, bitten by a legend on set, and dragged to prison over taxes she didn't owe. And through it all, she never broke. This is the story of how Sophia Loren went from disgrace to icon, from starvation to stardom, and why the most powerful part of her legacy isn't beauty, it's what she had to survive to earn it. Sophia Loren didn't arrive in this world with applause. She was born in 1934 in a charity hospital for unwed mothers. No father waiting outside, no name carved in love. Just her mother, Romilda, crying behind the sterile clink of hospital doors. The man who had fathered Sophia refused to give her his name, then disappeared without a trace. When he returned years later, he did it again. Another child, another abandonment. Sophia's little sister Maria was left nameless too. And when Sophia finally earned enough fame to buy her sister the right to their father's name, she had to pay him for it. Not out of love, out of necessity. It wasn't closure. It was humiliation with a receipt. The world remembers Sophia Loren as the face of glamour. But before the lipstick, before the gowns, before the magazine covers, there was hunger. She was raised in Pozzuoli near Naples during the aftermath of World War II. Her home wasn't a house. It was a crumbling space overcrowded with desperate relatives, 10 people sleeping on the floor, stacked in one room. Her mother, once a local beauty queen, scraped by playing piano in shady clubs. Her grandmother sold homemade cherry liquor from their living room. Sophia, still a child, washed dishes and smiled for soldiers, not because she meant it, but because she didn't have a choice. The pain wasn't loud. It was constant. Her stomach stayed empty, her body stayed thin, and the teasing followed her like a shadow. Kids at school called her toothpick. Some days, the only thing to eat was a potato or half a cup of rice begged from a neighbor. Once, her mother scooped water from a broken-down car's radiator just to keep her children alive. It wasn't dramatic, it was survival, the kind that scars your spirit before you even know what dreams are. Then came the war. Bombs fell over Naples like thunder, sirens screamed, streets split open, and in one moment of chaos, a piece of metal, shrapnel, ripped through Sophia's face, slicing her chin. She covered it with makeup for the rest of her life, but the memory stayed sharp. So did the shame. Even her wet nurse once whispered that Sophia had been the ugliest baby she had ever seen. Fame could cover many things, but childhood cruelty isn't one of them. Still, something inside her never gave up. Even when the world called her ugly, even when the cupboards were bare, even when the water tasted like metal, and the air smelled like fear, she didn't break. Not then. And not when the world started looking at her differently. Because that moment was coming, and it would change everything. By the time Sophia turned 14, something had shifted. Her body changed. Curves appeared. Her face sharpened. The same classmates who once mocked her started to stare. And the streets of Naples, which had always felt cold and judgmental, suddenly turned toward her with new attention. But for Sophia, beauty wasn't a dream come true. It was a weapon, her only shot at escape. She didn't see admiration in those glances. She saw a way out of the hunger, the shame, and the single potato dinners. So when she entered her first beauty pageant, she didn't do it for vanity. She did it because there were no other options. She wore a dress made from pink curtains. Literally. Her grandmother had stitched it together because they couldn't afford anything else. Sophia walked onto that stage not with confidence but with desperation. She didn't want a crown. She wanted air. She wanted freedom. That's when Carlo Ponti saw her. Ponti was nearly twice her age, a powerful Italian film producer, married, with children. But none of that stopped him from noticing the raw spark in the 16-year-old girl standing under the lights. He was mesmerized, not just by her beauty, but by the grief she didn't try to hide. In Sophia, he saw a story, one he wanted to shape, and shape it he did. He gave her a new name, Sophia Loren, something that would look good in film credits. He pulled strings, got her into auditions, and introduced her to the brutal machine of Italian cinema. Her early roles were tiny. Background parts, uncredited faces, often silent, but even in the shadows she glowed. The camera always found her, even when the director didn't dot her dough. But nothing about this rise was easy. The rumors started quickly. A teenage girl and a married man? The Catholic press labeled her immoral. Gossip spread. Older actresses sneered. The public judged her harder than any critic ever would. And through it all, Sophia kept moving. Because turning back meant hunger, turning back meant shame, and she'd already survived too much of both. What the world saw was a young beauty climbing the ranks. What they missed was the girl who still winced at the word illegitimate, the one who still felt the radiator water in her throat, the one who smiled for cameras but flinched inside every time someone whispered mistress. Carlo Ponti gave her opportunity, but it came with consequences she'd carry for decades. Because loving him would cost her not just public approval. It would nearly cost her her homeland, her career, and her sense of self. And yet, she chose him, again and again. The cameras started flashing. The headlines kept coming. But Sophia was no longer trying to be seen. She was trying to survive a new kind of war. One fought in silence, under scrutiny, with no place to hide. In the eyes of the public, Sophia Loren had made it. But behind the magazine covers and rising fame was a secret tearing her world apart. Her love for a man she could not claim. Carlo Ponti wasn't just her mentor, he was her lifeline. But he was also married. And in 1950s Italy, divorce wasn't just frowned upon, it was illegal. There was no way out. No clean slate, no future that didn't come soaked in judgment. For years, they lived in quiet defiance. Ponti separated from his wife, but the law didn't care. The church certainly didn't. To love Sophia in the open, Carlo risked everything, and so did she. But love doesn't ask for permission. In 1957, they took a risk that would define them forever. A secret marriage in Mexico. No guests, no cameras. Just two people clinging to each other in a world that had left them no room to breathe. But the world caught up quickly. Italian authorities charged Ponti with bigamy. The Vatican condemned the union. The press dragged Sophia's name through the dirt. The woman once mocked as a toothpick was now painted as a homewrecker, a moral threat, a symbol of scandal. She was barely in her 20s, yet the entire country turned its back on her. Rather than fight, they fled. France welcomed them when Italy would not. In exile, they tried to build a life. Carlo continued producing films. Sophia kept acting. But the pain never left. She missed her country, she missed her mother, and every time she stepped in front of a camera, she knew the people back home weren't cheering. They were judging. For almost a decade, they lived in legal and emotional limbo. No status, no protection, just love, and the endless effort it took to keep it alive. Finally, in 1966, they were granted French citizenship, and only then, almost 10 years after their first marriage, could they wed legally in the eyes of the world. But by then, the damage was done. Their careers had stalled. The gossip never stopped. And Sophia, once a girl begging for a single potato, had become the most talked about woman in Europe, not for her talent, but for her sins. And yet, through it all, she held her head high. She once said, "I wanted to be loved, not judged." But in loving Carlo, she was judged by millions. Still, she never apologized. Because for Sophia Loren, love wasn't something to be explained. It was something to be endured. To the outside world, Sophia Loren was glowing. Her films were selling out theaters. Her name was respected on both sides of the Atlantic. She was no longer just a beauty, she was an international star. But behind the camera, her greatest battle was one no headline could explain. She wanted a family, and she kept losing it. Sophia suffered multiple miscarriages, quietly, alone. Each one left her a little more hollow, a little more tired. There were no press statements, no public tears. Just silence, and the weight of a dream that refused to come true. Each time I lost a child, she later said, a part of me faded. The world knew her as a goddess. But at home, she was just a woman longing for something she couldn't hold. When she finally became a mother, first to Carlo Jr. in 1968, then Eduardo in 1973, it wasn't just a happy moment, it was survival. The long, brutal climb from shame to motherhood had finally given her peace. These weren't just sons, they were proof that she could win, even after the world told her she couldn't. By the late 1950s, Sophia Loren was no longer just a rising star. She was an international phenomenon. Hollywood welcomed her with open arms, and for a moment it seemed like the world had finally accepted her. But fame doesn't erase cruelty. It just makes it quieter, more private, and far more dangerous. The first blow came from someone she admired. Peter Sellers, the British comedy legend, became obsessed with her while filming The Millionaires in 1960. He was charming, brilliant, and funny until he wasn't, plays an house heir. He left his wife and children, convinced that Sophia would choose him. She couldn't, and her rejection, though kind, unraveled him. He spiraled publicly, and Sophia, despite doing nothing wrong, carried the guilt. I felt sorry for him, she later said, but it wasn't my fault. Then came something far worse. In 1967, on the set of A Countess from Hong Kong, she worked alongside Marlon Brando, a legend in his own right, and someone she believed she could trust. But Brando crossed a line. During a scene meant to portray passion, he went off script. He grabbed her. He kissed her violently. And then he bit her lip, hard enough to draw blood. The crew froze. The cameras stopped. And Sophia, stunned and humiliated, simply pulled away and looked him in the eye. "Never do that to me again," she said. That was all. No screaming, no legal threats. Just a line in the sand, sharp, quiet, immovable. She never spoke about it publicly for years. Because that's how women like Sophia survived Hollywood. Not by fighting every battle out loud, but by making it clear they couldn't be broken. She later said she learned how to say no with her eyes. Because in an industry that praised her beauty, her voice was often ignored. She was adored, but she wasn't always respected. And yet, through every violation, every unwanted touch, every moment where her dignity was tested, she never let them see her fall. Sophia Loren didn't play victims. She played survivors, on screen and off. Sophia Loren had survived war, poverty, and scandal. She had conquered Hollywood, won an Oscar, and rebuilt her life from nothing. But in 1982, the world saw a very different image of her. Not in a gown, not on a red carpet, but behind bars. Not for a crime of violence, not for betrayal or fraud, but for something painfully mundane, unpaid taxes. The Italian courts accused her of evading a tax bill from years prior, an error, her lawyers claimed, rooted in paperwork and miscommunication. It didn't matter, the ruling was swift. Sophia Loren, one of the most beloved women in the world, was sentenced to 30 days in prison. She served 17 of them in a Naples jail. And for her, those 17 days felt like a lifetime. There was no special treatment, no luxury accommodations, just a metal cot, a cold cell, and a pair of eyes watching her, not with admiration, but with suspicion. The guards had grown up seeing her on magazine covers. Now they saw her in handcuffs. The shift was brutal, the shame unbearable. Those 17 days felt like 17 years, she later admitted. Because this wasn't just a punishment, it was a public stripping of dignity. She didn't cry for the cameras. She didn't release a statement. She simply endured it. And when the doors finally opened, when she walked out into the daylight again, She didn't hide behind sunglasses or flee in shame. She wore a crisp white suit, her head held high, her steps deliberate. She knew the press would be there. She knew they'd be waiting to capture her at her lowest, and so she gave them something else entirely, a masterclass in resilience. That moment, the image of Sophia Loren exiting prison not as a broken woman but as one unshaken by humiliation, would go on to define her almost as much as any film she ever made. It reminded the world that she wasn't just a screen goddess. She was human. And more importantly, she was unbreakable. For a woman born into nothing, Sophia Loren ended up owning nearly everything, but she never bragged about it. While the world was fixated on her looks, her roles, and her scandals, Sophia was quietly building a financial empire behind the scenes. It wasn't handed to her. It wasn't inherited. It was conquered, one hard-earned victory at a time. By the time Carlo Ponti passed away in 2007, he and Sophia had spent more than 50 years building something far more lasting than film credits: legacy. Together, they invested in art, real estate, and business ventures, transforming their love story, once considered disgraceful, into one of Italy's most remarkable financial success stories. Their villa in Rome wasn't just a home, it was a symbol. Tucked away in the city's historic Aurelian Way and surrounded by sprawling gardens, it stood like a fortress, elegant and untouchable. Inside, the walls were lined with Renaissance paintings, rare sculptures, and a private art collection that rivaled small museums. Her art collection alone included a Francis Bacon painting that sold for $16.5 million. Jewelry heists had targeted her personal pieces, not because they were flashy, but because they were priceless. Estimates of her net worth today range from $75 million to $150 million. Sophia Loren's fortune isn't just about money, it's about the climb, the grind, the refusal to stay where the world tried to leave her, and in that way, every inch of her empire is a monument. Not to fame, but to endurance. By the time most stars reach their 90s, they fade quietly into retirement, their names tucked away in old film reels and photo archives. But Sophia Loren isn't most stars. Even now, long after the cameras stopped rolling regularly, she hasn't disappeared. She's evolved. The same woman who once faced war, scandal, and shame now walks through life with a kind of grace that doesn't ask for attention. It commands it. In 2023, at the age of 89, Sophia suffered a serious fall, a broken hip, a fractured thigh. For anyone else, it might have marked the end of mobility, the start of permanent stillness. But Sophia didn't surrender. She entered rehabilitation with the same determination that once pulled her out of poverty, 5 days a week, focused, disciplined. She wasn't trying to be seen, she was trying to heal. Because that's what she's always done, survive with elegance. Even before that, she was rewriting what aging in Hollywood could look like. In 2020, at 86, she starred in The Life Ahead, a Netflix film directed by her son Eduardo Ponti. It wasn't a vanity project, it wasn't nostalgia. It was a raw, haunting performance that reminded the world why she had once won an Oscar, and why her talent never depended on youth or beauty. Critics called it a revelation. Audiences called it unforgettable. For Sophia, it was just another truth she needed to tell. She became the face of Dolce & Gabbana's Rosa Excelsa perfume. She opened a namesake restaurant in Hong Kong. She inspired a Netflix documentary titled, "What Would Sophia Loren Do?" A question fans around the world have asked, not because she's perfect, but because she isn't. She's endured. She's adapted. She's shown how pain can become poise. Today, Sophia lives mostly in Geneva, Switzerland. She sold her iconic Roman villa in 2007. She let go of her grand California estate, but she didn't downsize out of defeat. She simplified out of peace. Her life now is quiet, curated, and filled with the things that matter: family, memory, and the dignity she fought so hard to protect. On her 90th birthday, she wore Giorgio Armani and diamonds. But the glow wasn't from the clothes. It came from something deeper, a kind of earned serenity. The world once saw her as a goddess. But what she's become is rarer, a woman who outlived her myth and still stands tall. Sophia once said, "There is a fountain of youth. It is your mind, your talents, the creativity you bring to your life." That belief carried her from a bombed-out apartment in Naples to the heights of Hollywood, and it still carries her today. Sophia Loren's life isn't just a story. It's a blueprint for surviving the impossible. She wasn't handed fame. She clawed her way toward it with chipped nails, bruised dignity, and a voice that refused to stay silent even when it trembled. From the forgotten corners of war-torn Naples to the peak of international cinema, she didn't just rise. She transformed every wound into strength, every insult into fuel, and every silence into legacy. She was the girl they called ugly, the child born without a name, the teenager judged for loving the wrong man, the woman who sat in a prison cell when the world decided to forget her humanity. And through every fall, literal and metaphorical, she got back up. Not with rage, not with excuses, but with a kind of grace that doesn't demand your respect. It earns it. Sophia Loren is not a relic of the past. She is a reminder. That beauty means nothing without courage. That fame is hollow without dignity. And that no matter how many times the world tries to define you, your story is still yours to write. She never stopped choosing herself. Not when she was mocked. Not when she was judged. Not even when her lip bled on a film set. She kept moving forward. Quietly. Powerfully. Always. In an industry that burns bright and fades fast, Sophia Loren is a flame that refused to go out. And even now, living quietly, walking slowly, smiling gently, she still burns. Not because of what she achieved, but because of what she overcame to get there.